The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with former Oshkosh Mayor and City Councilwoman Melanie Bloechl. It's that time again when we do another viewpoint. That means we give our viewpoint and the viewpoint of any of you folks out there who have sent us letters or given us comments that you'd like to make. So with that, we're just going to jump into the fray here. One of the most recent things, of course, that has happened, and we should state that we're taping this on the 9th of September, last week, on the 2nd. One of the former assistant district attorneys in Winnebago County, Mitch Shireland, who, when he left that office, went back to being a defense attorney. He was sentenced last week for, as we taped this, it was last week, for tax evasion, one count of tax evasion, and his sentence actually was rather disappointing.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
At least to me, and I think it was to a lot of people in the community. He got 2 years probation, a $5,000 fine, and he has to pay restitution. And of course, he, prior to sentencing, had to surrender his law license, and he now has the distinguished title of being convicted felon. This all came about because he had underreported his income between the years of 1997 and 2000 by more than $150,000, which, when you calculate that out, he had basically cheated the government out of about $53,000 in income taxes. And, you know, he did face 3 years in prison, a federal prison, and $250,000 in fines. Okay, so 3 years in a federal prison, $250,000 in fines, and he gets a $5,000 fine and 2 years probation.
Well, I totally agree with you, Cheryl. And you know what really made me angry, and you know me, I don't agree with the Northwestern on a whole lot of stuff, but in one of their editorials, they had actually made mention of the fact that the $5,000 fine didn't even reimburse the lost revenue on taxes that, had he reported his income properly, we would have received as city and state people.
Sure, but I think that's part of the restitution, because I do believe he does have to make restitution as well. So you know, the government will recoup that
Over a period of time.
Over a period of time, sure. Yeah. But then, you know, there's this $5,000 on top of it all. But I guess, you know, and the reason that the judge, William Griesbach up in Green Bay at the federal courthouse, you know, gave him such a slap on the wrist is because he had cooperated with them so much in the investigation to get former Winnebago County DA Joe Paulus. Now, I understand about cooperating with the authorities, you know, a little fish helping to get a bigger fish or whatever. I understand that's part of the process, but the thing is, Mitch Shireland, if you talk to people who are close to this investigation, and we have, Mitch Shireland more than likely would not have cooperated had the federal prosecutors not had him dead to rights. You know, if he had thought for 1 second that maybe he had some wiggle room here and wasn't going to get nailed for anything, I don't know that he would have cooperated quite as quickly and efficiently, if you will, and thoroughly as he did. And that's how people close to this investigation feel too.
Well, I guess I look at it as these two gentlemen, Joe Paulus and Mitch Shireland, conspired to defraud. And one is no less guilty than the other just by virtue of cooperation. I mean, what Mitch did is just as bad as what Joe did. Now, granted, Joe had the bigger title. He was the district attorney. But Mitch was his deputy. I mean...
Well, no. At the time that this was going on, though, he wasn't.
Well, regardless, he was still in that office, still responsible
No.
for Kate. Oh, that's right. I apologize.
I don't mean to correct you,
no,
but
no,
no,
I'm glad
no,
you did. You're absolutely right,
he was a
because he was defense
defense
attorney at the
Right,
time.
right.
And then was brought into the office
Right.
as the deputy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
what am I
yeah.
thinking?
Well,
You know?
we're getting, I mean, we're just getting, there's so much to this whole thing. It's no wonder anybody can keep it straight, much less us.
Well, I think what muddies the water is that it had gone on for such a long period of
Yeah.
time, and then to add insult to injury, these guys both knowing that they were bantering back and forth with bribery and conspiracy.
Yeah.
Joe then had the audacity to bring the guy into his office and make him his deputy.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm mixing my anger here, but
Yeah.
it kind of all spills over into the
No,
same thing.
that's
so.
understandable. But the interesting thing about this is, so Mitch gets this nothing sentence from Judge Griesbach, and so Griesbach departed downward from the sentencing guidelines with respect to Shireland, but he departs upward from the sentencing guidelines for Joe. Rightfully so, because Joe was facing as much as 8 years in prison, and I think it was $500,000 in fines, I don't recall. And he was guilty on 2 counts, one of bribery and the second of tax fraud or tax evasion. But, he departed upward from the sentencing guidelines, which under the sentencing guidelines he would have gotten a maximum of 33 months. Everybody was saying he was going to get 30 months. Well, Judge Griesbach departed upwards and he gave him 58 months. We're talking 2 months shy of 5 years. And
people still thought that was lesser than what he should have gotten.
Yes, well, except for people like our current county executive, Jane Vandehei, who was on TV saying things about it, and the one who really seemed to be outraged by the sentence was former Register of Deeds in Winnebago County, Marge Dobbs. I think that people like this are just in a state of denial. They cannot believe, and they will not accept, it seems, what Mr. Paulus did. And yet the proof was right there. It's uncontroverted, and he's admitted to it, and yet they still don't think that he should be punished. And yet, and I've made this point on other shows before, they didn't think that he should have been punished to the degree that the judge punished him. He still got less than what he could have gotten if the letter of the law had been followed to the nth degree. But anyone else who makes a plea bargain, that just seems to be perfectly acceptable, that they get, stuck with the plea bargain that they've agreed to, or sometimes judges depart up on that. I've seen judges here in Winnebago County who depart upward from the plea bargain that's been agreed to, and nobody seems to have a problem with that. But here they have a problem with it, and I don't understand why.
Well, I think it's because of the affiliations. I mean, this man ran in a circle that, it's the good old boy network. You want to protect your own. Yeah. We couldn't possibly have a bad guy in our network because he's part of the network, so therefore we have to protect him in some way. Interestingly, kind of to dovetail on the Mitch Shireland, Joe Paulus saga, did you see that on the television during this whole Mitch Shireland thing? Shortly thereafter, they started doing a series on the Melanie case, which is, I believe he was a firefighter that his wife perished in a house fire, and he was accused of murdering her, and he's saying it was suicide. And Joe Paulus was the DA at the time, and Gerald Boyle was Maloney's attorney, which again sends up all kinds of red flags to me. Obviously, I'm not a detective or what have you, but very interesting that Joe Paulus, once he's dethroned as DA, ends up going to work for Jerry Boyle, and then, of course, this all ends up being a travesty. But in the Melanie case, the TV news did some investigation, and there was a videotape and a transcript during the Melanie case, and the television station, and I apologize, I can't remember if it was I believe it was Channel 5, is doing kind of ongoing story about the Melanie case, that when they started investigating this story due to Mr. Paulus's illegal behavior, due to the strange happenstance of Mr. Paulus going to work for Mr. Bloechl, and again, evidently red flags went up for other people. They dug out an old videotape and transcripts from this trial, and the tape and the transcripts don't match. They literally went through this and said that there were pieces of testimony missing, and Vince Biskubic was on the TV saying, well, you know, we don't always transcribe every word. We try to make it concise and succinct, and really, what are you in a hurry for? You know, I mean, so I find this real interesting that there may be a real domino effect to, and I know that there are probably people who think that, you know, gee, let sleeping dogs lie. Joe Paulus is going to go to jail. Mitch Shireland's going to go to jail. You know, they've gotten what they deserved. Leave them alone. You know, they don't deserve all this publicity. But where I'm going with this is that how many other people are going to be in the wake of all this? And now we've got this Melanie case, which has some pretty significant inconsistencies that the news media is now picking up on. And this man has served how much time in jail already? He was convicted of murder.
Yeah, he's been there a couple of years for sure.
Yeah, and so
and
now
has proclaimed his innocence all the time. And I know that a lot of folks, when they go to prison, they are still proclaiming innocence.
But it does it
but-
not? I
yeah.
mean, it certainly raises questions with me that, you know, when you start putting these things out there, which the average person would not be aware of, that the transcript and the videotape had evidently been doctored in some fashion, and there were bills that came to Winnebago County to the tune of $23,000 for video editing, and they said that is so highly unusual that there would be bills to that magnitude associated with editing of video, and that there were notes written, and evidently Malone's girlfriend, the transcript was sent to her, and she wrote on there, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the exact terminology, but she wrote on the top of the letter that Mr. Paulus had sent to her to kind of sign off on the transcript that this was taken out of context.
See, well, and you, when you were mayor, you have said for years that you didn't like the way the Walter Pagel thing came down.
I have some huge concerns
Yeah.
about how when attorneys were selected for our police department, how that selection process took place. And I know because I spoke with the officers that were involved. I was, you know, I went into those meetings. I was at that trial and was at the coroner's inquest. I wanted to see what was going on. This was all very new to me. I had no idea what a coroner's inquest was. You know, being in a leadership capacity during a very volatile situation in our community, I wanted to be, I guess, not front row because, you know, this is kind of like a voyeurism thing, but to understand what was happening to some very respected officers in our community. And when the attorney selection came about, the officers that were involved in the union had some very specific requests as to who they wanted representing them. None of them suggested that Mitch Shireland nor Mr. Bolenbeck would be their choices.
And yet those are the two who ended up being attorneys for these four officers.
And they were both of these individuals, both of these attorneys that I've mentioned, Mitch Shireland and Mr. Bolenbeck, were suggested by our district attorney to our city attorney.
And then, to add insult to injury, Mr. Paulus, after having referred the criminal matter to the district attorney down in Milwaukee County, he still recommended that the city settle this.
Correct.
And, you know, it's all just kind of interesting how...
He was involved in meetings in
Sure.
the city manager's office to discuss the disbursement of insurance funds prior to any civil action, even a sentence coming down.
See, and that's what's weird about the whole thing, Mel, is because he is a criminal prosecutor. What in God's name is he doing sticking his nose and every other body part into a civil matter, especially after he's, you know, forwarded the criminal part of it out of the county altogether because of a conflict of interest.
Exactly.
It just stinks.
Well, and you know, I'm certainly not a legal eagle, and I don't proclaim to be such, but you know when you smell skunk that it's pretty much skunk. I knew something wasn't right. To say exactly what that was, I didn't feel as though I had that kind of knowledge. But you know how it is when you know something's wrong. You know something is going on, but you can't quite put your finger on what that is. That was the feeling that I got. And, you know, I talked to the city attorney about it. I voiced my opinions to other people in the community that, you know, something just isn't right here. I don't know what it is, and I feel like I should know what it is. And, you know, everybody was very busy letting me know that, you know, really, obviously I was having a nervous breakdown. I was
Well,
totally
you know,
wrong.
it's not the first time you've been accused of yelling that the sky is falling when it hasn't been.
Miss Kitty's now Chicken Little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so, but, you know, you have always proven to be correct in situations like that.
I think in some, you know, the level of correctness, I guess, depends on what vantage point you come from. You know, you can say, gee, I feel like there's something wrong. Can I say my instincts are pretty accurate? Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Do I have them pinpointed to be able to say, this is exactly what's wrong, this is when it transpired, and this is what, you know, this was the outcome? No, I can't say that I've ever been that good. But like I said, my instincts are pretty
Yeah, they are.
accurate, and
They absolutely are.
that I'm very grateful for. I just wish that I had more knowledge to be able to take those instincts and actually formulate them into something a little bit more cohesive and quantifiable.
Sure.
You know.
Well, the Wisconsin Department of Justice is still investigating all of this, and you know, they've got, from what I understand, 4 investigators working on it. Time will tell just how much more they may find, and just how many more people are possibly involved in all of this.
I just hope and pray that there are not truly innocent people that are left to suffer in the wake of things that many of us, while we feel like there's something wrong, we can't put our finger on it, and there are innocent people who have been left to suffer, either being incarcerated or wrongly accused, or their reputation besmirched to such a point that they can't recover. And I do think that that has happened in this community. I really do believe that that has happened. And, you know, sometimes when those things go on for such a long period of time, I mean, let's face it, Joe was in that office, what, 14 years?
I think so.
That's a long time to have, you know, the iron hammer of justice, you know, swinging on your behalf and not always in a fair motion. So that frightens me quite a bit, because, you know, you always think, well, my God, what if that was, you know, we're just average people. What if we would have been accused? How do you fight that?
Right.
You know, there's never enough money, and there's, you know, you can lose everything.
That's right. Want to make one quick note for the public. Many of you have written to us asking us, and I'm shifting gears here,
That's
sorry.
okay. No.
While I was thinking of it, a number of folks have written to us or called us asking for, you know, trying to get some of these congressional candidates and senatorial candidates on the air. We are working on that. We're not having a lot of luck with some of them. And of course, the problem here is there's just so many candidates to get on and not enough time to do it. When we're only taping 2 nights out of the month, there's just not a lot of time, because these folks have very busy schedules. We have been trying diligently to get Feingold on, but Mr. Feingold's office is not helping us too much.
Well, you know, I've definitely come up with an idea on how we can save money at a federal level. We can start cutting some of the staff that seems to be in the way.
Well, and I thought maybe it was just that, you know, he's got people who handle press type requests and things like that, and indeed he does. But, you know, I've talked to a few more people who have said that if you want to hear from Senator Russ Feingold, you know, rot's a rock, because
Send up smoke signals?
he does not, from what these folks have told me, he has not returned their phone calls, he has not answered emails that they have sent him, and that's a frightening thing. When you've got a U.S. Senator, I realize that when you get to be to the position of a U.S. Senator, you've got a lot of people tugging at your apron strings, wanting a piece of your time here and a piece of your time there. But, somebody should be being responsive to these folks, and if this is really what's happening, I think that's sad. It's not that they have not answered our calls. We've had to make a number of calls just to actually get them to return a phone call. But eventually they did return phone calls, and they're trying to work something out with their schedule. But I don't know that they're trying really hard. I mean, what they have pretty much said to us is, we'll just call you when we're in town and we'll just pop in and do the show. Well, I've tried to explain to them, and Mel's tried to explain to them, that that's not the way this works. We work full-time jobs. Our crew works full-time jobs, and they have full-time commitments. And, we have to book the studios here. We all have to get assembled, and we can't just, be prepared to tape a show with Senator Feingold at the drop of a hat. So sorry, that's not going to work. Contrary
to public belief or senatorial belief, we don't all sit pasted in our chairs waiting for someone to show up.
To drop by. But we do tentatively have booked for the 14th of October. They're shifting cameras on me here. There we go. For the 14th of October, we pretty much, but it's still tentative. I will know next week. By the time this show airs, I will know. We've tentatively got booked the senatorial hopeful Russ Darrow, so we'll know for sure on that. And if that is a go, then that will be we'll be taping with him on the 14th of October, and we would welcome your questions for him. But someone who has recently been on the show is the 54th Assembly District Representative incumbent Greg Underheim. And we were grateful that he found time to come on the show, and we had certainly a lot of folks send us questions for Representative Underheim. I guess I was a little frustrated with that show because, and I'm not telling tales out of school here. Greg Underheim asked us afterwards how we thought it went, and I was candid with him. I told him that honestly, I said it with all due respect, I felt that his answers a lot of times were very long-winded, and went in circles. They really did. It's hard. It's hard to, when you ask a question of someone, you don't want to cut them off mid-sentence. You don't want to not give them a full opportunity to answer the question to the fullest degree that they want to answer it. But I think sometimes with politicians who have been in politics for a long time, they have a tendency to, they want to get their own agenda out there. They want to make the points that they want to make. And so they end up, in trying to answer your question, they go in circles. And honest to God, there were a few times I sat here and I thought, what in the world was the question? But fortunately, we had the questions written down, so we knew what the question was, and we would have to go back to that. And that was one of the most frustrating interviews for me.
Well, I think that you've given a lot of credit to some politicians by even virtue of saying when they try to answer your question. Because I think what ends up happening is they really don't want to answer your very direct question.
And some may not, no.
And I think what they end up doing is subterfuge. If you throw enough crap into the bucket and whip it up, something's going to come flying out and stick. And I think unfortunately that happens far more than getting the answers that we're looking for. I think one of the disturbing parts for me, and again, I have to give Greg credit because Greg and I have gone hammer and tong. I've run against him. It was a very contentious campaign. I have not spared any of my feelings about shared revenue or the antics of our then Governor Tommy Thompson getting involved in the campaign. I thought that was really just smarmy Republican crap. So there's not been a whole lot of love lost there. And you have to give credit where credit is due. Any person who is willing to sit across the table with you, look eyeball to eyeball, and tell you what he believes, despite whatever your personal differences are, and even political differences. That takes a lot of courage, and that takes some backbone. With that being said, I was just absolutely, every single debate, every single person that I've talked to during this campaign season, one of the biggest issues is, of course, health care for everybody. I mean, we're all struggling with it. Unless, of course, you work for, you're an elected official working for the government, and then you really don't worry about it as much. But those of us who are having some difficulty, that is a big issue. And I was so frustrated when I'm asking Greg, so what do you think is driving the cost of health care? And we got to health savings accounts. Now, I am here to tell you, health savings accounts are not going to do jack squat about driving down the costs of health care. Yeah. They're not going to.
Well, he answered the three things that are driving the cost of health care, but he never said really definitively what they're trying to do to reverse this, this skyrocketing.
But he didn't really address it, because if you understand health care, it's not just the doctors and the hospitals and those things that are driving health care. They are a symptom of spiraling costs. The core reason that health care is spiraling out of control is the duplication of services. It is just like cities and towns and any other government. We listen to the state government talk about consolidating services within communities. We only want one police department. We're arguing whether we should have a county sheriff's department in Oshkosh PD. They want those things consolidated so you're not paying for both that are doing predominantly the same thing. Healthcare is very much the same thing. What is driving the costs of healthcare, in my humble opinion, and I've worked in healthcare a long time, is the duplication of services. And I'm using these entities because they are local. You have Aurora, you have Affinity, and now you have Theta Clark, also known as Theta Care, right here in Oshkosh. They are all within a circumference of probably 3 miles of one another. Every single one of these facilities has X-ray machines, CT machines, MRI machines. They do blood work. They do urinalysis. They're all providing essentially the same services. The problem, people, that we have here is that when Mercy Medical Center was the only game in town, and I'm just using, these are not official numbers, I'm just throwing out a number. You had 10,000 people. Let's just say 10,000 people that were receiving services at Mercy Medical Center because they're the only ones who provided this service. Okay? Now Aurora comes in. Now this 10,000 people is divided essentially in half. Okay? So you've got 5,000 going to Mercy and 5,000 going to Aurora, providing the exact same services. The problem here is that in order to pay for the X-ray machine, the CT machine, the MRI machine, all the laboratory equipment, now instead of having 10,000 people who are being tested and paying in to pay off the amortization and all the help, you only have 5,000.
Well, that's true. And that was Affinity's complaint when Aurora wanted to build its hospital. They said, costs are going to go up. I don't know, because I don't work in the field, I don't know how much costs have gone up per se since the second hospital's come to town. But by the same token, I think that competitive services, competitive entities are good. I mean, competition is good for business. Let's face it, a lot of people don't care for Mercy Hospital. A lot of people don't. And they were going up to Theta Clark in Neenah.
Correct.
Now they don't have to do that. Of course, now, the way insurance is, you have to go here, you have to go there. The days of picking your own doctor are pretty much long gone.
So you really don't have the choices that drive the market anyway, because competitiveness drives the market, or market should drive competition. But the problem is that the people who have the lock on the market are the very entities that you're talking about. You have Aurora, who owns all the physicians' practices, and you have Mercy, who owns all their doctors' practices. And each one of them owns an insurance company.
See, and that's where I see the problem, and I don't know that much about what's driving this up and what's driving that up and what's causing this to happen, but it seems to me that the costs of insurance started escalating when everybody got more and more wrapped up in the PPOs and the HMOs. That's when I started hearing more complaints from people about, can't pick my own doctor, have to go here, I'd rather go there. And that's when you started seeing the costs skyrocket and people not being able to afford insurance and employers saying, for God's sake, can't you do something to lower these costs? This is a benefit that we've long since been able to provide to our employees, and it's killing us now.
And that's and you have to go back to the CEOs and the COOs, the chief operational officers, the financial officers of the hospitals, because they are the people who own those insurance companies who are putting together packages that are of untenable prices for employers, and thereby affecting each and every single employee. See, what has happened in this community is, by virtue of what used to be in place in the state legislature, is something that was called the determination of necessity. What that meant is that if Mercy Medical Center and now Aurora decide that they need an MRI machine, they have to prove to the state that indeed geographically and demographically there is a need that prevails in that community that must be met, that cannot be met by the other facility. Now what it did was it forced these entities to work together. You didn't have insurance companies battling for the same people. You didn't have this infighting, and forgive my language, but it's turned into a pissing match. I mean, it is an all-out bloodbath in this community when it comes to insurances and what facilities you're going to go to. And the only people being smashed in the middle are people like you and I. And quite frankly, the employees who are trying to provide services. So if you went back to this determination of necessity, it would force these entities, the Mercies, the Auroras, the Theta Cares, to come back to the table and form a consortium to work together and figure out how all of these people in this geographic area are going to be cared for. Because you only have one MRI, you only have one CT, you only have so many x-ray pieces of equipment. So they have to work together so all of their patients will be taken care of in a timely fashion. Right now, everybody's going out and borrowing money. They're maxed out with the state fund. They're building like crazy. They can't fill these facilities, and nobody has enough business in order to keep their doctors working, to keep the equipment working, and to pay off the bills. And that, in my mind, is what's driving these costs incredibly high. That's why you're seeing more out-of-pocket expenditures, that they want the patients to be paying more. And it's not going to get better until we understand what the core causes are.
But getting back to Greg Underheim,
he didn't understand the core cause.
Well,
he truly believes that health savings accounts are going to be our savior.
And the thing is, with a health savings account, you have to be
employed.
You have to not just employed, but you have to be employed by someone whose health plan is a qualifying plan to be able to offer a health savings account. And while many of them are, there are a large number of them that aren't. So how is that going to help? You got to have something that's going to benefit everybody and help everybody, and the health savings accounts, that doesn't even begin to address the poor sap out there who can't get any insurance, period.
Well, and the difficulty also with health savings accounts is if you're talking to larger employers who already have an HR administrative department put together, you know, you're talking about larger companies, they can absorb this kind of paperwork and dispersing these kinds of things and tracking these kinds of things. But if you're talking about a small businessman or woman who wants to be able to provide for their employees a basic human right, as I believe it, and that is to be able to take care of yourself, your health, and your family, it is a very difficult and arduous and burdensome thing to thrust upon someone. And I think that in the United States of America, that we don't raise holy hell, that we do not have affordable health care as a basic human right, that every single individual, working, not working, young, old, whatever your situation, mentally indigent, physically indigent, whatever your situation, that we do not demand that that is a basic human entitlement, a right that we have as individuals in this country, is so far off base it's unbelievable.
Well, and then have you seen the, you know, we talked about Senator Feingold before. Have you seen his commercials where he's on the table and he's in a medical office and he's having his blood pressure taken, and he says something about, is something to the effect of, you know, he's not going to stop working on health care improvement until we all have as good a health care plan as he has as a member of Congress. Give me a break. How is he going to do that? I'd like to get him on the show and have him sit down here and tell us how he intends to do that. Well, I would like to see that.
Me too.
But I don't think we're going to.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm going to go back because we had talked about Russ Feingold and the difficulty in getting him on a show. I was talking with one of the guests in a previous show, and I said, you know, it's really sad because Russ Feingold is just absolutely, whoever his marketing person is, they are just absolutely nothing short of genius. These commercials that he puts together strike at the very heart of people. They're very common. They're very straightforward. It's not theatrics. It is just pure gold. And they work beautifully. People love Russ Feingold. They love those commercials. And that's why it saddens me that here you're seeing this guy on this commercial and he seems, you know, he's looking right at you and he's very sincere and
he seems very approachable, very down to earth, like the guy next door mowing his lawn on a Saturday morning.
Yeah. And so then when you get back to reality and you say, gee, I'd like to talk to Russ. Is he around? Russ? You know, do you know what I mean? When we were making our phone calls and you're going through these hoops on fire. And I understand, like you said, you know, this is a higher level and you have to respect the responsibilities, the additional responsibilities. But when you're doing cable access, we are grassroots. We are where he started.
Yeah.
You remember his commercial, I live here in Janesville, this is where I'm from, the whole, I still remember that, or the closet commercial where, look, I don't have any skeletons in my closet. He invited you into his house. He started grassroots. He has, in my mind, got a lot of people excited again about listening to people like U.S. senators and wanting people to believe again that they are telling us the truth. So it was very disheartening for me because I'm thinking this guy is going to be so like all over this show. He's just going to be like so ready to do this. And then it's like, well, you know, we'll stop in when we can. No, I don't think so.
Well, it doesn't work that way. It's not practical. There's just no way for us to accommodate.
But I'm going to call again. I'm not giving up because I truly believe the squeaky wheel does get the oil.
Well, see, you're working on him now. I'm working on the Restero thing, and you know,
we'll see who really is the right Russ.
Well, at least the approachable Russ, where we can actually get him here.
Exactly.
We've hit a lot tonight on health care, and the Oshkosh School Board recently made a decision that has a little bit to do with health care. They made a decision to sell soda in their vending machines in the schools. And we've been running an online poll for viewers of the show and visitors to our website to participate in. Now, you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the comments that the school district's nutritionist made, but you know, they did make this decision to sell soda in the vending machines in the school district's facilities. And I just want to give you quickly the results of our poll. You know, the poll clearly asked, very simply, if the school district should be selling soda pop in their vending machines. 63.49%, and I pulled these numbers just before we came over to tape the show tonight. 63.49% of the people participating said no, the school system, especially the nutritionists, have a responsibility to encourage students to develop and maintain healthy eating habits. And besides, if students are hungry or thirsty, they will buy healthy things if that's all that's offered. Now, 36.51% said yes, it generates revenue, and it's the students' right to choose if they want to drink soda or something else more healthy during the school day. So obviously, two-thirds of the people, almost two-thirds of the people out there feel like we do, that the school system should have some responsibility in this and offer some more healthy choices to the students.
Well, I watched that particular school board meeting, and I have to tell you, I don't know if Peggy West, who is I believe her title is actually Director of Food Services, I don't know if she actually has the degree of a nutritionalist or not, and if she does, great. And
okay, but she's the Director of Food Services
correct.
Or something.
She is the ultimate,
okay.
the buck
right.
stops here gal.
Okay.
And she was actually up there with, I believe, the gentleman from Finances, Brad Kaufman, correct? They were at the school board meeting, and I was very, very impressed with one of the newest school board members, Mr. Sween.
Don Sween, sure.
He's an ex-teacher.
He's doing a very good job.
I'll tell you, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about him. Being an ex-teacher and all, you know, but I watched him this particular evening. I was very impressed. He had obviously spent a great deal of time talking to other school districts. In particular, he spoke with, I believe it was Appleton East, trying to find out what they were doing from a nutritional standpoint, and you know, were they offering soda in the schools, and if so, how were they going about doing that? Appleton East does not provide soda in their schools at all. It is not available. And he felt very strongly, based on talking to their Director of Food Services, that this was really kind of the way to go. Appleton East is a very progressive school district. They're always doing cutting edge things. You know, they're really progressive in their thought process. And sometimes I get very frustrated. I kept hearing in this discussion from our school system about revenue. They signed, and actually they had been providing soda in their vending machines for quite some time in the schools. I remember when they actually did it when I was in school, which may explain a lot of this. Okay, you may want them to stop faster. But they signed a 10-year exclusive contract with Pepsi. And with that, generated X amount of dollars in revenue. Listening to Peggy West, you know, again, their whole discussion was about revenue. Now, this is a woman whose sole responsibility is to be providing a nutritious, balanced environment for our students. Now, if there are parents who want their kids to have soda and they want to send it to school in their cold lunch or whatever, okay, go ahead, that's your choice. But from a school system's perspective, where we have type 2 diabetes, obesity is just running rampant, we're spending thousands of dollars on exercise equipment. Do you remember the whole physical fitness, you know, gym class? We're doing spinning because the kids are so fat, okay? But yet we're still, in order to generate revenue, we think it's perfectly acceptable to pump them full of liquid candy.
It's more doublespeak, and
Yes.
the fact of the matter is that what Mr. Sween found was that they are actually doing better
in their tests and their day-to-day work.
and the faculty too, the staff too, is being more productive. So, you know, we hear all the time how Oshkosh needs to be more progressive. We need to be more progressive. And while most of those comments are coming about the city being more progressive, I think that, the school district is part of the city. So if we really want to be progressive, then let's take a look at what some of these other places are doing. Why do we have to feel that we have all the answers here? That ends up making us being rather pedestrian in our views, and it limits what you're able to do. We need to start looking at what some other places are doing and not being so afraid to say, hey, these folks here, they really do have a good idea. And, that's something that when Matt O'Malley was on the council, the Oshkosh Common Council, I disagreed with some of the things that he would say and some of the things he would do, and that's okay. We're different people. But I always gave Matt credit for, he would think nothing of contacting another community to see how they're doing something. And yet that was an idea, those were ideas that were just sort of poo-pooed and swept under the carpet. And, we've got to start looking at other things and seeing how other people are doing things, because obviously these other communities, these other school districts are finding varying levels of success with what they're doing.
Well, I guess my question is I have to question Peggy West. Is she the best person in this position that she's not willing to step forward and say, you know what, this probably wasn't the best idea from a nutritional standpoint, because that is her background.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to question that. For God's sake, we had doctors coming forward saying, nobody should be smoking in restaurants because it's bad for all of us. But we've got a nutritional saying, hey, pound those Cokes because we make 75 cents a bottle, whatever.
Well, the poll is still on there, so feel free to keep voting. We're trying to have these polls be accurate, as accurate as possible. So please, tempting as it may be, when that little bullet is there and it's empty, please try and refrain from casting multiple votes. I think the way the website administrator or the website hosts have their program, their software allows people to vote every day or every other day. Please refrain from doing that. We really want to get as good of an idea of how people feel as we possibly can. We're running so much out of time already. I can't even believe this, and we've not even begun to scratch the surface. But one thing that we do certainly want to touch on is the Riverside Park project. We always have something to say on this project. And
I was going to say, what would another Viewpoint be without it?
Yes, this episode is no different. Now, Melanie and I attended on August 31st or August 30th a meeting of the review committee for this Riverside Park project. And one of the things that we learned is that Community Development Director Jackson Kinney wants to defer $167,000 of work in the phase 1 set of projects. He wants to defer that to phase 2 so that they can do some other things that they need, that they hadn't counted on, that they hadn't budgeted for. Now, one of the things was some kind of I didn't quite understand what he was saying. It was some kind of a trough area separating the stage from the people where cables for the sound system and stuff are going to be buried. So that's one thing. Another thing was a 4-window ticket booth to sell tickets for the events. And then here's the one that is really going to...
This is the best one. You got to almost do a drum roll, because this is too good.
We're talking men's and women's bathrooms. Whether they'd thought about them before or not, I don't know. But now all of a sudden, we need to, in the capital improvements budget that is going to come before the city council later this year, we need to find up to $650,000. That's $650,000 for men's and women's bathrooms for this amphitheater extravaganza. Now,
the golden commodes, as
now
we like to
I
call
don't
them.
care how Mr. Kinney wants to, and I like Jackson as a person, but I think that, again, this thing's been railroaded through at lightning speed. And, I mean, please, you hadn't thought about a ticket booth? Where in the hell did you think you were going to sell tickets from? You know, I mean, if they had not shoved this through so fast, then they would have been able to think things through. But you see, we had to appease the Leach. Yeah, we had to appease the Leach Foundation. And so he wants to defer this $167,000 from phase 1 to phase 2 so that we've got money to do this other stuff. But you know, the thing of it is, it's not enough to do what he necessarily wants to do, or so it wouldn't seem, not when you're looking at $650,000 for cans. And in addition to that, you still have to pay for the other stuff later on. Now, let's not forget, too, folks, that this is a project that for the first phase of it came in, the bid that they approved, which was the low bid, came in at $400,000 to $500,000 more than what our very well-schooled city council members had planned on. So this is going to continue to nickel and dime us.
Nickel and dime?
Well, I'm being
Good
conservative.
Lord, those are
and
pretty
polite.
big nickels.
But, well, and think how many butter burgers that is.
Amen, sister. I was going
Think
to
how
go
many
there. You
butter
bet.
burgers that really is. Now, so we have all these things that are starting to add up. Now, I think what's going to be very interesting is to sit back and see how our city manager, Dick Wollink, is going to find this $650,000. Let's even say it's $500,000. Let's say we can get bathrooms for less, you know, than the $650,000. But let's just say it's $500,000, and I don't think that from the way they talk they're going to be able to do this for less than that. So let's say he needs to find an extra $500,000. What is he not going to put in the capital improvements budget in order to find that money? That's what I want to know. Something's going to suffer.
Well, and the thing is that you won't know what that is, because they know ahead of time that these are the things that are going to have to be covered, because they've put their proverbial hinders on the line. Mm-hmm. So we will never know what has been eliminated from that capital improvements program, because of course Mr. Wollink and his staff are the people who will develop it, including Jackson Kinney. So you just don't put $650,000 worth of other things that may need to be paid attention to in the city. Yeah. You just don't put them on the list.
You know, and let's not forget that in the capital improvements budget, what that consists of are streets,
sewer, water,
major
laterals.
equipment, fire trucks, police cars. You know, you need a backhoe. That's all part of capital improvements.
Yep.
And you know, my God, has anyone driven down some of our streets lately? You know, we need streets to be fixed, patched somehow.
We need them to actually reopen the ones they've been working on all summer.
Yeah, this is getting to be a bit silly too.
It's ridiculous.
But, you know, it's just going to be very interesting. And this just, it continues adding up and adding up and adding up.
It's
and
outrageous.
Oh, it is. And I can't wait, Mel, to see the final price tag when all is said and done at the very end. And they're actually doing, by the way, they expect to have this open for the public to start seeing venues there by next spring. So
I'll get my hand puppets ready.
in the in the meantime, go on down to the old site there, the old Wisconsin Public Service site next
And
to Riverside Park,
till your heart's
because
content.
you can see what they've been doing. They've been moving a lot of dirt around, and so you got this huge pile of dirt down there. A couple other things real quickly. There was I had filed a complaint back in March or April, it's been so long I forgot, about the Oshkosh Can Board and its donation to Breathe Free Oshkosh and some of its other activities. Yesterday, I got a phone call from, and this was referred up to the Brown County District Attorney, John Zakowski. I got a phone call from him day before we taped this show. He is putting some things together. He is very concerned about what he sees, and he said, and I played the message for you.
Yes.
He said he is more concerned about the fact that this was not a single episode.
Isolated
This
incident,
was
right.
not an isolated incident. And so what he's going to do, I don't know. He's still putting together his report, but we are in contact with each other, and it's not been an issue that has just been left to languish. We are still, staying on top of it, and we'll let you know what's happening. Before we do run out of time, I also want to mention that the first time that this show airs will be on Monday the 13th. Tomorrow, of course, I say tomorrow because it's when it's going to air. It will be Election Day, primary Election Day. Please go to the polls and vote. I realize that, a lot of people tend to just forget about primary election days, but,
Really
this is, it really is. And especially for the candidates in the Register of Deeds race, because since they're all Republicans, this primary is going to decide who our next Register of Deeds is in Winnebago County. So please go to the polls on the 14th of September and cast your ballot. And, if you're watching this on Thursday or Saturday after the election's been held, we hope you went to the polls. But if you're watching this on Monday night, please go to the polls tomorrow and vote. We recently saw a debate with the candidates from the 53rd Assembly District, and we really don't have a whole lot of time to get into that. Just suffice it to say, Carol Owens, the current representative for that district, just, again, she's been on the show before. She may be a very nice woman, but she just came off in this thing as being very nasty. I mean, she just right out of the chute started making comments that I don't think people really knew what in the world she was even talking about. If you didn't read the paper, you'd have no clue what this woman was talking about. And then she really got under people's skin, at least a lot of people, with her comments on the gay marriage issue and the abortion issues. I mean, those were two things that just really, I've never seen such
Cruelty.
Oh,
Nasty.
Yeah, it really was. I don't care what she says about the gay marriage issue being about marriage, or rather being about money. Yeah, part of it is about money. Gay people they end up paying double taxes because they don't get the marriage credit, but it's also about human rights. She's preaching morality, and I would respectfully submit to Ms. Owens that if she wants to preach morality, she needs to leave Madison, leave the assembly, and enter the seminary where she can preach every Sunday and on Saturdays too if she wants. Even on Wednesdays if she wants, she can preach 7 days a week. But she's being paid to represent all people, not just those who, subscribe to her same moral beliefs. This is a human rights issue. Gosh, we're out of time.
I thought you did very well.
Well, thank you. We do want to encourage people to get involved with some of these causes. Let us know what you think.
For
We
God's sake,
cannot
vote.
do it alone. Yeah, and please vote.
Please vote.
But start letting the city council and the school board and the county board know your thoughts on things too, because we can't do it alone, folks. We need your help. We need people to voice their concerns to these city council members, especially because they're the ones who seem to be spinning us in a hole. Anyway, thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.